You're listening to the February 25th, 2016 edition of the Surfwatch Cyber Risk Roundup, the weekly podcast that's focused on how the world of cybercrime is impacting business. The Surfwatch Cyber Risk Roundup is brought to you by Surfwatch Labs. Hello, everybody out there. I am Jeff Peters, Surfwatch Labs editor, and I'm here with Matt Leifus, Surfwatch Labs writer. On this podcast, every week we bring you the top 5 trending cybercrime events, advisories, and legal actions based on Surfwatch Labs data. So we'll start off with the top cybercrime events from the past week.
Coming in at number 1 this week, and this was a pretty big one. I'm sure a lot of you have probably saw this in the news. Linux Mint suffered a data breach. Here's a breakdown of what happened. This happened earlier this week. Hackers got into and modified a PHP script that was part of a WordPress installation used by the Mint project. If you use Mint's download page to find your way to your download of choice, the malicious PHP script would redirect you to an imposter website. The only infected downloads were the versions known as Linux Mint 17.3 Cinnamon Edition. The imposter server contained both 32-bit and 64-bit versions of Cinnamon, but only the 64-bit version is known to have been hacked. I can't remember the numbers on this, Jeff, and I apologize out there. I didn't actually have this information, but
there's like 6 million people that use this distribution, but I believe it's just the people that downloaded it during the window when this false version was put up. But one thing that I did notice is there was a interview on ZDNet a couple days ago with the supposed hacker, this guy named Peace. Supposedly he's the one who basically put up this fake version of it. He also claims to have stolen an entire copy of the site's forum. And he said that he was just poking around the site in January when he found this vulnerability, which basically granted him unauthorized access. And he also said, this is kind of interesting, he said that he has the login credentials to the site's admin panel, but he didn't obviously tell the guy how he got that or didn't really explain. So he's basically saying it's a little more than just this one thing. So that was the big story, obviously, because, Linux is widely used, and this is a pretty widely distributed version of it. One of the other big stories this week was YouKnowKids.com. They had a potential leak, whatever you want to call it. They are a Virginia-based company, and they provide child monitoring services for parents.
No, what do you think that? What do you think that is? Child monitoring. I mean, I'm envisioning like the little baby monitor or something like this. Do you think this is a company that actually does that, or when it said baby monitoring service, I kind of laugh because I just there's some things out there, like I see parents do some crazy things to like help watch their kids. That just made me laugh. Sorry, guys, a little off subject.
Total side note, but have you ever actually seen one of these parents with like their children on a leash? I've never seen one in public, but I've seen them online, and I just
Jeff. For those of you out there that don't know, Jeff and I actually went to high school together, and I'm not going to say her name, but there's one of the girls we went to high school with does this. I've actually seen her do it. So she posts pictures of it. I kind of think it's a little weird, but anyway, that's another story, I suppose.
If their kid gets kidnapped or something, then they're going to say...
yeah, true. Okay,
I should have had
absolutely.
Him on a leash, but anyways, this Kids, I don't really know much about him, but the story is that Chris Vickery, we've brought him up a few times on the podcast. He basically finds these vulnerable databases and then reports to companies about them. And at least he has recently. Vickery discovered this database, which left the sensitive information exposed for 48 days, and I think it affected about 1,700 children. So this database was exposed out there. Who knows if someone got at it, if they did anything with it. I haven't seen anything saying like someone definitely downloaded it, but he noticed it out there. And if he noticed it, I'm sure other people could have as well. He said that we believe that protecting a child's digital identity is just as important as protecting a child's social security number or other sensitive information. The potential for abuse or safety risks involved with the unsecured data collection of children is a nightmare that no parent ever wants to be faced with.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past, how child data of any kind is very coveted by hackers. because there's a lot more you can do with it. And if you think about it, and it makes a lot of sense, with a child, right now we're talking about digital content, but, let's look at some of their, like personal information, like social security numbers. You're probably not going to monitor your child's credit because they're a kid, they're not doing anything. So that's just one example, like with children and some of the data you can get from them, it can be very valuable because of the fact that it's not really monitored as much, and hackers can do a lot more with it.
Yeah, and not to turn this into a whole parenting tips podcast, but I don't know if you remember this, Matt, but when you and I went through that dark web kind of tour a month or two ago, not that we were looking for child pornography, but it's just kind of there, and I just mentioned this because, like some children's pictures were taken.
Yeah, it was like kind of like an advertisement, and it was very disturbing. There was a young girl on there. It was
basically just kind of like like you'd see in like a JCPenney kind of catalog, know. So it's something totally innocent, but it just made me think.
Yep.
It's just kind of weird that there's this whole underground people who know and follow the careers of like these 6-year-old models, and that's kind of a whole other road.
No, I think that's very relevant. I mean, when you're kind of looking at this digital data or these digital identities, what are we talking about? We're talking about photos and I guess everything that would be related to this child monitoring service. This is all stuff that, there's unfortunately with the dark web, not all of it's bad, but there are definitely some dark corners of the dark web that there are a lot of predators out there. So we're talking about children and pictures. Yeah, I think that's very relevant. And I think that's something that parents should be worried about.
And not to tie this instance in any way to child pornography. So I make that clear so we don't, get a call from kids.
Yeah, and of those 1,700 children that are affected, I mean, it was only, when you say only 1,700 children, but there were actually millions of photos belonging to these 1,700 kids that are potentially exposed. I mean, that's quite a bit of information. Coming in at number 3, moving on from that kind of depressing topic, coming in number 3, we have a New Jersey hospital that leaked employee information. St. Joseph Hospital out of New Jersey suffered a security breach, which leaked the personal information of its employees. According to the hospital, around 5,000 employees are affected by the breach. The hospital says a phishing scam led to the, quote, unintentional disclosure of employee information, including social security numbers. The hospital did say, if you want to try to find the silver lining and everything, they did say that the leaked information did not include patient medical information. So, yay for patients, sorry employees.
This story is kind of similar to another story that happened this week at York Hospital. The employees there were hit with a data breach as well. So, we're kind of seeing 2 different hospitals with employee data breaches this past week. York Hospital is based in York, Maine. And this attack took place on February 22nd, and it led to personal information being obtained. According to the hospital, no patient information was obtained in this attack. It was just employee information, and that includes names, addresses, social security numbers, and 2015 wage information. So the hospital is working with the FBI to investigate the incident, but just kind of interesting coincidence, or maybe not a coincidence. I mean, I guess obviously that kind of information is getting targeted by everybody.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there wasn't a number. We don't know how many people were affected in that particular instance. The last target for the week, and it's been a little while since we talked about this, Xbox Live suffered who could fill in the blank? A DDoS attack. Yeah, that's kind of almost a running gag at this point. This time the group responsible was New World Hackers. We've talked about them before in previous podcasts. The attack took place earlier this week, and it was actually the second time Xbox Live was attacked this month. Customers were complaining about this recent attack that they were unable to do many of the basic functions on Xbox Live, including accessing downloaded content, register new accounts, or even just browsing the Xbox store. The New World Hackers said they targeted Xbox Live because of its weak security, which we've kind of heard before. I even think Lizard Squad, like they might have said something like they did it for the lulz, which a lot of hacktivists say they do. But I think that was also one of the things. They target these gaming networks because of their weak security to kind of protest, right?
I've interviewed people about that in the past, and I don't really know anything about Microsoft and Xbox's situation, but they've explained to me that, especially with gaming, really you don't need to bring anything down. You just need to, cause some lag to kind of make it basically useless for
Right.
different gamers. So with all these people around the world playing and all this different data going around, not to cut slack to Microsoft, but from the people I've talked to, it's not quite as simple of a thing as sometimes these media reports make it out to be.
Right. It almost sounds like a Herculean task. I mean, you have so many people that are on it. It kind of seems like it's almost impossible to protect everyone from an attack like that. Here is what a hacker from New World Hackers had to say. Major companies like this have massive servers but no real protection. We want Xbox to update the protection they have, which isn't much, end quote. So just kind of like what Jeff said.
That is the dumbest argument, though.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to punch you in the face so that you learn that you should wear a helmet. Like,
Yeah. Right.
Like, you punch him in the face and then you're like, well, see, you should have known.
Yeah, right.
What? Yeah, so those were the top 5 events this week. There wasn't really anything too huge or major other than the Linux story was really the big one. But moving on to the advisory section, the top advisory this week has to do with Ace Card malware evolving. This is an Android Trojan that has slowly evolved into one of the biggest threats against Android devices. According to researchers, this Trojan has been observed in over 6,000 attacks from May to September 2015. And the majority of these were against Android users in Russia, Germany, and Australia. But other countries have experienced attacks as well, such as the US, UK, France, Spain, Turkey. This Trojan is able to mimic 32 different banking and payment systems and Google Play screens, several Russian bank interfaces, and by mimicking them, it's able to basically phish credentials from users and things like that. Currently, developers are evolving the Trojan to have a lock command, which would add a ransomware feature to the malware as well. Can't have proper malware without some ransomware.
Yeah, no kidding.
This Trojan is spread through spam emails the usual way, and they attempt to entice users to third-party app stores. And I feel like a broken record because every week on the podcast, there's always somewhere in these stories third-party app stores.
Yeah, you could pretty much bet on this with like a lot of these Android malwares. It was either an app downloaded from a third-party app store or something from some porn app.
Yeah, and this Ace Card malware, it's most commonly advertised as either a version of Adobe Flash for Android or as an Android pornography app called Porn Video. In December, security researchers did find this Trojan inside a game distributed through the Google Play Store.
The second top trending advisory for the week is another Android malware. Android's been very popular with advisories recently. It has to do with the Android GM bot malware, and the source code for this malware was leaked. So what this means is, the source code was leaked for this malware, which essentially provides hackers with a free malware tool. Researchers discovered late last week that this code for this malware was leaked on the dark web in December 2015. Instead of developing their own malware, many hackers actually opt to pay for malware creators. Like they'll pay like a one-time fee for some type of malware tool, or they have like subscriptions depending on the malware developer or distributor, and they don't actually create their own malware. Now with this though, because the leaked information for the GM bot malware came with the source code and instructions for how to use it, malware distributors will pretty much try to evolve its capabilities. So I mean, in the future, look for that. This malware, and also on top of that, because now that here's a free tool for hackers to use, guarantee you're going to seeing it used more often. It's a free tool. It's very effective. And here's some background about the malware. It was originally discovered in 2014. It's Russian-based in origin. The Trojan targets banks, so it's a banking malware, and it attempts to trick users into handing over their banking credentials by placing fraudulent windows on top of banking applications. The Trojan is also capable of intercepting SMS messages on infected mobile devices and can also remotely control those infected devices.
Yeah, this was interesting because obviously if you have like two-factor authentication or something on your bank, they can basically steal your credentials and then intercept the SMS messages. I thought this was funny though, in a way, because I mean, there's like no honor amongst thieves, and basically from what I read, someone actually legitimately purchased this. And then one of the customers, trying to make himself sound like a big shot on the dark web, ended up releasing it. So it's it's kind of funny. I love when criminals screw over other criminals.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, in this case, it's a bad thing because now, it's basically out in the wild. Anyone can take it, tweak it, use it however they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot going on the Android front, and we can talk a whole lot about the cybercrime as a service. I find that very fascinating. But moving on to the number 3 advisory, this one I thought was pretty interesting when I saw the headline this week. E-commerce fraud is up 163% in 2015. That was one of the predictions, was that everyone was saying this would happen. Obviously, if you secure the physical world a little better, then the e-commerce fraud goes up. This number comes from the Global Fraud Attack Index, and they said that it went up 163%. So the report investigated a few different areas of e-commerce fraud, such as digital goods, luxury goods, food and beverage, clothing, and electronics. The biggest riser was digital goods, where fraud was up 254%.
Wow.
That's quite a bit.
That's quite a bit, yeah.
We see that all the time, in our own data. You see all these different goods for sale on the dark web and things like that. So that was the big one, digital goods, followed up by luxury goods, which was up 108%. Interesting, though, food and beverage, down 51%. I'm not sure exactly how they classify food and beverage in this report, because, it's obviously e-commerce. We have seen a bit of, like with the hotels breaches, a lot of those are affecting like the restaurants and the shops inside hotels. But that's obviously not e-commerce. So I'm not sure exactly how they classify the food and beverage stuff in this report. According to the Global Fraud Attack Index, if you want to Google that and find out some more information on it.
Yeah, that was pretty shocking when I saw. Well, not shocking, I guess. I mean, we kind of expect like a lot of these as cyber criminals kind of evolve and find new attack vectors and things. We expect some of these numbers to come up, but that's a huge rise. So that kind of knocked me off guard. As well as this one, there are a lot of reports that came out this week, and so we felt it was a good idea to share some of the information. Here's another report that came up with just a random figure. 700 million records were compromised in 2015. 700 million.
Now, that's an interesting number, but I'm pretty sure that's that, because I know Gemalto, they released a report last year, and I remember I interviewed one of the guys about it, and I'm pretty sure last year it was close to 1 billion. I think it was like 900 and something.
You're right.
Not to like poo-poo
only 700. Like only 700? Wow. It was a huge victory on the cybersecurity front. Well, as a matter of fact, this report comes from Gemalto. And again, they said, they found 700 million data records were compromised. And this was stemming from 1,673 data breaches, all in 2015. The findings are part of the company's breach level index. The numbers indicate that 22 records were lost per second in 2015. Shockingly, and this kind of falls into Jeff and I have talked about some of this a little bit, only 4% of those records utilized strong encryption, which of course would have made the stolen data unreadable and pretty much worthless to the hackers. Another key point of the report found that the majority of incidents were related to identity theft at 53%, compared to financial access at 22% or account access at 11%. So, looks like we got a long way to go. I mean, if we're talking 2014, if we were close to 1 billion, yeah, the numbers might have fallen a little bit, but that's still a lot. As a matter of fact, I saw another report today. It's a prediction for 2016 of what cybercrime is going to cost the global economy, and the number was close to $500 billion.
And then the final advisory for this week that we're going to talk about is this mousejack vulnerability. This is according to researchers from Bastille Networks. They said that 7 manufacturers of non-Bluetooth devices have products that are vulnerable to mousejack attacks. And they say non-Bluetooth because they're talking about wireless keyboards and mice, which are the targets of this attack. Bastille says that, communication from most keyboards to these USB dongles is encrypted, that none of the mice that it tested encrypt their wireless communication. So therefore, like these mice will accept commands from an attacker that's within close physical proximity, the same way it would from a user. So they said that as long as someone was within, say, like 100 meters, they'd be able to pull off this attack. Basically able to send wireless stuff to your mouse and your keyboard and use that to try to install malware, things like that.
Nice. Yeah. I don't like that.
Yeah, it's like the more you learn about Internet of Things and Wi-Fi and all these stuff, it's like Just put me in a bunker with a hard wire.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say, the chances of you having a neighbor or someone within 100 meters of you that is going to specifically target your system with something like this, it's probably
person
slim
to person. But if
yeah.
you know that the big company in town,
exactly,
if you know that they're using wireless things that are vulnerable, you pop in.
you can just stand in the center of the building and just have a heyday.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this would probably be a more targeted kind of attack, but it's definitely an avenue to be aware of.
Moving on to trending settlements, lawsuits, and legal news. Probably the biggest story we saw all week involved the FTC and ASUS, and it had to do with ASUS routers putting consumers at risk. And let's dig into that a little bit. Hundreds of thousands of consumers were put at risk due to critical security flaws in ASUS routers and its insecure cloud USB services, according to the settlement between Taiwan-based ASUS Tech Computer Incorporated and the FTC. ASUS marketed its routers as including numerous security features that the company claimed could, quote, protect computers from any unauthorized access. That already doesn't sound good. Hacking
I know.
and virus
Never
attacks.
advertise that you could, if you advertise you're going to stop any unauthorized access and hacking, you're probably going to get in trouble.
Probably. Researchers discovered several security bugs in ASUS routers, and the FTC alleges that the company did not address security flaws in a timely manner and did not notify consumers about the risk posed by the vulnerable routers. ASUS must establish a comprehensive security program and notify consumers about software updates or other steps they can take to protect themselves from security flaws.
Yeah, and one of the things I noticed in the FTC press release, they said, like as an example, ASUS would update these routers firmware, but then people who had the routers, you would check it, and the router would say, "Oh, you have the latest update," even though you really didn't, so you'd still remain vulnerable. This was like a really big story, I think, like about a year ago. It seemed like every week we're seeing stories of new routers being vulnerable.
Yes.
So it's interesting, now like a year later, we're seeing some of these companies paying the price. The FTC, they actually had a pretty busy week. They had a few different things that I saw pop out, a few different settlements and things come out. One of the other big ones, though, that we're going to talk about is there was a data broker operation that was basically what they did was they collected hundreds of thousands of loan applications from payday loan websites, and then they sold that information. So they would, basically prey on people in tough financial times, collect their information, promising them stuff. And then they wouldn't do anything with it. They would sell them for 50 cents each to third parties. So, I mean, and this information included, had bank routing numbers, bank account numbers, social security numbers, all that kind of stuff needed for these loans. And the FTC alleges that they sold them to, quote, entities it knew had no legitimate need for it. So basically just passing along to different scammers and stuff. So this order prohibits the defendants from transferring or selling any sensitive personal information about consumers to third parties. And there's also a $5.7 million monetary judgment, but that judgment is suspended based on the defendant's inability to pay. But there is another $4.1 million judgment against the remaining defendant in this case, Site Search. I mean, I was kind of shocked that it was only 50 cents a piece.
Yeah, and 50 cents each for this information. I wonder how good the information is going to be if they don't have. The one thing
but if you're not talking about people who have thousands of dollars in their bank account,
right?
So I would imagine it'd be higher, if it's accounts from a more lucrative zip code or something. But when obviously if you're going to a payday lender, you probably don't have a couple of grand sitting in your checking account.
Probably not. Yeah, moving on. We have a class action lawsuit that was filed, and this is stemming from the Scottrade breach. Last week, a consolidated class action lawsuit was filed in Missouri federal court. In October 2015, for those who remember, Scottrade disclosed a data breach. It affected 4.6 million customers, but the cyber intrusion actually occurred in late 2013 and early 2014. The time it took Scottrade to discover the theft is an, quote, inexcusable failure of Scottrade's obligation to take reasonable steps to safeguard this information. According to the lawsuit, that's what they're alleging. Scottrade's cybersecurity measures were so deficient that it never realized the massive theft occurred until 2 years later when federal authorities told them about it.
MoneyGram was another settlement that was in the news. They agreed to pay $13 million to settle an investigation that was going on into fraudulent money transfers using their service. Basically, the claims are that con artists used MoneyGram's service in order to dupe customers into different scams. A couple of these scams, there's like the popular lottery scams, and there's like the grandparent scams where basically they prey on the elderly. They say, hey, your grandchildren are in trouble. We need some money. Wire us some money. And they were using this MoneyGram service kind of as a conduit to do their scams. So there was an investigation going on, and MoneyGram has agreed to pay $13 million over that. So $9 million of this is going to be used for a nationwide fund to reimburse some of the affected customers. And then the other $4 million will cover states' costs and fees. Because this is like a nationwide company. I think they said there was 49 different states attorneys general and Washington, D.C. were all kind of involved in this thing. So according to Reuters, the company has agreed to better fraud training for its agents, and then also having a hotline to report violations of its anti-fraud policy.
And the last bit of legal news for the week, we're going to talk about Lyft and Uber. It's been a little bit since we talked about
it seems like they're always in the news.
Yeah, they're in the middle of their little pissing match, I'll call it. If you follow the story, there's been a lot of back and forth. Uber suffered a data breach, and I'll just get into it. Lyft accused Uber of a witch hunt in litigation related to a May 2014 data breach that led to as many as 50,000 Uber drivers having their information accessed. Someone had previously downloaded its driver's database, and the security key needed to access that database had been left on GitHub by mistake.
That's what's so funny about this whole thing. It all started because Uber basically messed up. They basically left the key to their database out there for anybody, and then someone took the key, and now there's this whole lawsuit about it. It's just...
And they're kind of blaming Lyft for this?
Well, originally there was some people saying that like an IP address tied to one of the Lyft executives was the one who accessed the key. But now apparently in this new litigation, they're saying it was not the executive, but they're subpoenaing another unnamed Lyft employee. And that's what Lyft's upset about. They're basically subpoenaing this employee.
Lyft has said, just like Jeff said, that none of its employees were involved in their competitor's breach, hence why they're, a little mad. However, Uber has subpoenaed an unnamed Lyft employee and has demanded information on the employee's communication with Uber drivers and passengers, web browsing activity, and other information. Lyft called Uber's data request an attempt to dig into its competitor's internal, confidential, and trade secret information, and that its requests are abusive and harassing.
Yeah, so that wraps up this week's top trending cybercrime events, advisories, and legal actions. Now we have our funny story of the week brought to you by Matt.
So in the cybersecurity world, we talk about how difficult it is to arrest cybercriminals. However, I read a story this week, and I think I got the answer to how we can arrest some more people. I think it's just going to be blind luck, Jeff. And here's why. Martin Gottesfeld and his wife, for reasons unknown, were on a boat apparently traveling to Cuba. Unfortunately for them, the boat's engine broke down and they were stranded, in the ocean there. They were spotted by a Disney cruise ship and rescued.
Disney to the rescue.
Disney to the rescue. This is when the story gets a little interesting. Gottesfeld is a member of the hacktivist group Anonymous and is wanted in connection with the April 2014 cyber attack against Boston Children's Hospital. Little backstory on that in case people don't remember. This attack was part of Op Justina, which was an operation carried out by Anonymous over the 16-month custody battle between Justina Pelletier, her parents, and Boston Hospital. Justina's parents wanted her to be treated for mitochondrial disease, but couldn't because Boston Children's Hospital had her locked in a psychiatric unit as a ward of the state. Anonymous got involved, as they do, and caused some disruption at the Children's Hospital. When Gottesfeld and his wife were rescued, the FBI caught wind of his location, and he was arrested. Apparently, the FBI was looking for him, and so I thought it was kind of funny that, what are the odds that you're in a boat going to Cuba? They didn't really get into why they were going to Cuba. It's a pretty new story. They get rescued by a Disney cruise line, and then once they're thinking, hey, our prayers are answered, we're saved, the FBI happens to be there, identifies him, and he gets arrested.
Sounds like a fun vacation.
Yeah, a little bit. And I just want to point out, Jeff and I have our opinions of hacktivism, but the only reason I thought this was funny was because of those events. If anything obviously happened to them, it wouldn't be funny.
All right, and that'll wrap up this week's podcast. As always, the Surfwatch Cyber Risk Roundup is brought to you by Surfwatch Labs. Surfwatch Labs delivers cyber risk intelligence solutions that help organizations understand the potential for cyber attacks, determine the impact to their business, and proactively address threats head-on. For weekly interviews with cyber experts, check out Surfwatch Labs' other podcast, The Cyber Chat. And for more information on cyber risk intelligence and keeping your business safe from cybercrime, check out surfwatchlabs.com.